Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to talk about the High Classical period. This dates to circa 450 to 400 BCE. And probably the most important thing to note during this period is we have a time period where we have two city-states that really have emerged as the dominant city-states. And these are Sparta and Athens, and you've probably heard of these two. So Sparta was more of a warring city-state, but women had more rights. But children were taken away from their parents at a young age, and the treatment of the children was not that great. They were more or less starved and made to work out long hours, and they're expected actually to steal food to survive, but if they were caught stealing, they were punished. In Athens, they were more into learning about the arts and education, but women were not considered citizens and didn't have any say in any form of government. So you have your pick of which you would like to live in. Now, Athens, because they were more into the arts, we know them more when we're looking at art history at this time period. Probably the most important architectural thing at this time in Athens would be the Acropolis, which I'm showing you at the moment. And on the Acropolis, there's a number of temples, not just one temple. So we have the Parthenon, which is the main temple, which you probably have heard of. But we'll also be looking at this temple, the Temple of Nike, and the Erechtheion, this temple, or the Porch of the Erechtheion. So here is the Parthenon as it looks today, and it is in ruins, as you can see, for a number of reasons. One, there are a lot of earthquakes in this area, so it's been damaged by earthquakes. It's simply been damaged because of how old it is. We're dating it here from circa 447 to 432 BCE, so quite a while ago. The Nazis at one time occupied Greece and in Athens, and they used the Parthenon as target practice. And then another group that came into power and occupied Athens were the Ottoman Turks. And when the Turks were in power, they actually took a lot of the artwork from the Parthenon here and they sold it to the British, and it's now in the British Museum. This has led to this giant debate between the British and the Greeks, because the Greeks are saying they want the artwork back, and the British are saying, well, it's not like we stole it, we paid for it. And then the Greeks say, but we weren't in power, it wasn't our choice, it was sold to you by occupying power. So then the British said, well, you don't really have a museum for the art. So the Greeks built this beautiful museum in Athens to hold the pieces from the Parthenon. And this is the latest. So it's still going back and forth between these two countries. So some of the work I'll show you today, you'll see that it's actually listed in the British Museum and not in Greece. The Parthenon, as we see, is a Doric style temple here with the Doric columns, because it has no real capital or no real base, or the capital is very simple, let's say. So let's look at some of the art from this. When we look at the overview from above, we have, just like in the previous videos, I've shown you that there's actually a temple within a temple here. So we have the outside columns, and then we have the temple, and then the very inner part of the temple called the cella. And this is where there was a statue dedicated to, or to represent, Athena, the goddess Athena. And the people truly believed that it embodied Athena, that the goddess lived within this statue. So they would be that they would feed it on a daily basis. Now, the pieces I'm showing you here, so you know, British Museum, these are going to go into the section called the pediment. So if you remember, that's this triangle section here. And just quickly to point a few things out about this is that we see women here, they're now having this type of application to how the drapery is carved called wet drapery. It's as though you take a piece of material and you put it in water and then you lay it on the body. So the women are still fully clothed, but now because the drapery is really clinging to the body, you can see the body through the material. This is even a better example of this wet drapery. And so you can see the breasts here, you can see the knees here, you can really begin to see the body that is emerging from underneath the material. Just because, as I said, all these things that have happened to the Parthenon over the years, these goddesses are headless, unfortunately, and have lost their arms. An example of, how detailed here from the East pediment. This is a horse's head. Just go through this very quickly. And then in the section here, I'll show you here, actually go back. Whoops. So it would be in what's called the frieze. In the frieze, we have these little square spaces that would have relief sculpture. And again, relief sculpture because it's still attached to the back. It's not three-dimensional sculpture. And what we have here is the depiction of the battle between the Lapiths and the centaurs. So the Athenians believed that there were these ancient people that lived in Athens called the Lapiths. And they were always battling the centaurs. And the centaurs were half human, half horse. And the centaurs represent like the animalistic side of humans. So they, they want to do everything, party constantly, get drunk, have sex, sleep all day, all of this kind of stuff. And so the Lapiths is always fighting with the centaurs. And then they had a wedding that was going to come up, the Lapiths. And they decided as a peace offering to invite the centaurs to this wedding. So the centaurs come to the wedding and everything's going really well until, of course, the centaurs get drunk. And the centaurs then, after they're inebriated, they begin to take the young maidens and they try to make off with them into the woods to have their way with them. So, of course, this battle ensues. And so the Athenians, they believe this story as kind of representing them, that they were the Lapiths and that anybody else that they were fighting against represents the centaurs. They're unrefined. They're not educated. They're just driven by their human desires. And so we have this battle between these two figures. And even though we're missing the head and we're missing some other things here, we can still tell that this is a really beautiful relief sculpture. And it's high relief because the figures almost look like they're not even attached to the background anymore. You have these strong diagonal lines. And diagonal lines always indicate movement and action within a piece. You have these beautiful curves of the drapery, the folds of the drapery. You have this kind of backward, forward motion that's shown by these diagonals, and the diagonal as the, the lapis is being pulled backward, and arm behind him, which would be very uncomfortable. And so showing that, the centaur, showing that the centaur in this case is losing this battle. And then we also have from the Parthenon the procession. And so this is the depiction of how at certain times of the year they would have processions up to the Parthenon to celebrate different holidays, mainly like the harvest festival, the planting in the spring, of things. And remember, they're mainly growing grapes and wine. So it would be then in the fall, the creation of the olive oil and the wine and other things like this. And so we see that the women are in these very simple togas that are really draped around them completely, and the men have this toga that's only over one shoulder. This figure is shown very beautifully, and this figure as well, very beautifully, with the contrapposto, with the knee bent and the shoulders and hips tilted. And now we have a couple of artists that we actually know their names, and I'm going to stop here and pick this up in another video.